When silence fell over Judah, the throne cried out for courage. He was not king by choice, but by calling. While men bowed to idols, he stood up in faith. 1,000,000 marched against him, and he responded with prayer. This is the story of a boy king who trusted in the God of the impossible. The boy who defeated 1,000,000. Silence hung over Jerusalem like a heavy veil. When King Abijah rested with his ancestors, the winds of change began to blow over Judah. The throne was passed to his son Asa, still a child, at one of the most delicate moments in the nation's history. Moral decay, deep-rooted idolatry, and a people increasingly distant from the God of their fathers characterized the era. The sacred text in 2 Chronicles, chapter 14, verses 1 and 2, reveals that in the early years of his reign, the land experienced 10 years of peace. But this peace was no coincidence. God granted this period as a time of reconstruction, and Asa seized every second to do what many adult kings did not dare: restore Judah's faithfulness to the Lord. Judah was covered with strange altars, Asherah poles, hills infested with idols, and pagan practices inherited from Canaanite influence. According to F.F. Bruce, Canaanite religiosity was not only immoral, but destructive to any culture that sought to maintain spiritual integrity. The worship of Baal and Asherah involved ritual prostitution and sacrifices that completely distorted the heart of true worship. Even as a youth, Asa understood that his mission was not merely to hold the throne, but to reconsecrate the nation. And that is exactly what he did. In his early years as king, when most were focused solely on political stability, Asa tore down the altars of foreign gods, destroyed the idolatrous pillars, and cut down the idol poles. He stood against the system, against decayed traditions, against the crowd. Because he was for God, God saw his heart and approved. Verse 2 sums it up. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. Edwin Yamauchi, an archaeologist and scholar of ancient Near Eastern religions, notes that the mixing of Israelite worship with pagan rituals was a common problem in post-Solomonic Judah. Many kings tolerated it. Asa, however, eradicated it. Discoveries at Tel Arad confirm this. Archaeologists found remains of Israelite sanctuaries with evidence of religious syncretism, pagan symbols mixed with objects of worship to the Lord, the same type of idolatry that Asa decided to eliminate in his first acts as king. The people, initially surprised, began to respond. Asa's reforms brought renewal. He did not just destroy, he restored. He commanded the people to seek the Lord, rebuilt the altar, reorganized the Levites and priests, and called all of Judah to worship the true God, not in the shadows of idolatrous groves, but in the light of restored covenant. During those 10 years of peace, the land flourished, with the idols fallen, the rains returned at the right time, the crops prospered, and the economy grew. Judah could breathe again. The people, once divided and lost, now had direction. Asa led with authority, not through military might, but through spiritual obedience. And this is precisely what marks the beginning of a new era in Judah. The throne had been occupied by a powerful man before, but never by someone so young and yet so courageous. Asa did not fear external threats because he knew that the greatest enemy was the idolatry within the gates, and he confronted it with unwavering determination. The crown was entrusted to him while he was still a boy, but Asa's heart was that of a giant, and during those first 10 years, he sowed the seeds of victory that would come later. But like any fertile ground, there would come a time of testing. Peace would not last forever. The eyes of a distant enemy were already fixed on Judah. now mature by faithfulness, would have to decide: trust in the strength of his soldiers, or once again call upon the God who had given him the first 10 years of rest. The time of peace continued over Judah. A silence of prosperity hung over the fields. The cities grew in harmony, and the people began to rediscover their identity as a chosen nation. During those 10 years of tranquility, Asa did not stand idle. On the contrary, it was precisely during this period that he strengthened the spiritual roots of the land, as one who prepares a house for the difficult days ahead. The scriptures record in 2 Chronicles 14 verses 3 to 8, and also in 1 Kings 15 verses 12 to 14, that Asa remained steadfast in his mission to purify Judah. He removed foreign altars, tore down idol poles, and commanded the people to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers. But the greatest cleansing was yet to come. The matter touched the very foundations of the palace and family ties. That was when Asa did something few kings would dare. He removed his own grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother because she had set up a horrid idol to the goddess Asherah. To many, this act might seem like dishonor, but to Asa, it was justice. He knew that idolatry was not fought only in the groves. If necessary, it had to be uprooted from the throne itself. This decision showed the people that no privilege should pass faithfulness to God, not even family ties. The Bible states, although the high places were not removed from Israel, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his days. 1 Kings 15 verse 14. This reveals that although he did not eradicate all places of proper worship, his heart was entirely devoted to the Lord. And that is what distinguishes a true reformer: integrity before God, even while the work is still in progress. The consequences of his faithfulness began to spread across the land. Cities were rebuilt, walls reinforced, and Asa organized a trained army with wisdom. From Judah, he formed a group of 300,000 men armed with large shields and spears. From Benjamin, another 280,000 skilled soldiers, proficient with bows and small shields. A total of 580,000 prepared warriors. But Asa knew that the true power of his nation did not lie in its ranks, but in the blessing of the living God. This preparation was not a sign of doubt, but of discernment. The king did not trust his army more than God. He understood that as long as peace endured, it was time to plant, build, and strengthen. Kenneth Kitchen, a renowned Egyptologist and scholar of Israel's history, notes that religious reforms among ancient peoples were often used as political tools. However, in Asa's case, his motivation was deeper than strategy. It was spiritual conviction. He did not cleanse the temple to please allies. He did it because he could not bear to see God's name profaned. The social effects of these reforms were remarkable. With idolatry weakened, the priests returned to teaching the law. The people resumed sacred festivals. Families rekindled prayer. The land, once tainted by profane sacrifices, now flourished under the care of a people who feared the Lord. Judah prospered. Trade was restored. Borders were secure. Order and justice began to prevail. All because the young king decided to put God at the center of everything. But the days of peace would not last forever. Judah's fame was growing, and with it, greedy eyes turned toward its fertile lands. In the south, a shadow began to stir. An unparalleled army was marching. This was not just another war. It was a challenge to the very God of Israel. King Asa would have to choose: trust in his 580,000 men, or bend his knees once more before the one who truly grants victory. If you're enjoying the story, leave an amen in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. What comes next will leave you breathless. The peace that had reigned in Judah for 10 years had been a gift. divine blessing granted to young King Asa so that he could spiritually rebuild his nation. But all true peace will one day be tested, and the trial approaching was like a black cloud on the horizon, heavy, dense, and threatening. Its name was Zerah the Ethiopian. The sacred text in 2 Chronicles 14 verses 9 to 10 describes the scene without hesitation. Zerah marched against Judah with 1 million armed men and 300 war chariots. 1 million. It is difficult to even grasp what that number meant in an era where the mere sound of 100 soldiers could throw entire cities into panic. It was an overwhelming force, an army as vast as it was ruthless. 300 iron war chariots, pulled by powerful horses, maneuvered by skilled archers, true instruments of swift and brutal destruction. Meanwhile, Asa commanded 580,000 soldiers split between Judah and Benjamin. His men were courageous, yes, well-trained, yes, but against that sea of spears, arrows, and horses, they were only half as many. On paper, this was a war already lost. But the Bible was not written to show what paper dictates. It was written to reveal what heaven decides. Who was Zerah? History provides few details, but scholars speculate that he may have been a Nubian commander, part of powerful people living south of Egypt, in the region now known as Sudan. The Nubians were occasional allies of Egyptians and known for their military prowess. Archaeologists have discovered royal tombs in Kerma, a fortified city of Nubia, containing bronze weapons, ceremonial spears, and inscriptions of military conquests, suggesting that armies like Zerah's were more real than many would like to believe. Some commentators suggest that Zerah might have been a title rather than a personal name, possibly denoting a regional leader with divine status, as was common among African kings of the time. Others theorize that he led a coalition, gathering forces from multiple southern tribes with the intent to conquer and plunder Judah. Regardless, he came with a thirst for destruction, and the battlefield chosen was Mareshah, an open plain near Judah's southwestern border. It was the perfect terrain for war chariots, flat, without many obstacles, ideal for swift and lethal attacks. Asa had a chance to retreat. He could have fled, hidden, negotiated, but he did the opposite. He marched there with his army, positioned his troops, and in the face of the impossible, did the unthinkable. While the enemies sharpened their weapons, Asa refined his faith. The tension was palpable. The sun burned over the armor. The ground trembled under the weight of the horses. Zerah's generals shouted orders in foreign tongues. And in the midst of it all, Asa did what no rational man would do in such a situation. He stopped and prayed. Before the first arrow was launched, Asa knelt. He did not seek alliances or ask Egypt for help. He sought the only source of power that truly mattered, the God of Israel. The prayer he offers in the following verse, which will be explored in the next chapter, is one of the most beautiful and sincere in the entire Bible. But before the prayer, there was the weight of a decision. That was the moment when the fiber of a king was tested. That was the moment when the throne became an altar. That was the moment when the battle would be won. On his knees, and Asa chose to trust. This act became a turning point in Judah's history, and can also be a milestone in your own life today. How many times have you found yourself surrounded by problems that seemed a million in number? How often have your resources felt too small? How many times has life led you to plains of Mareshah, where everything around you screamed defeat? Asa teaches that there is another way, that before raising the sword, one must lift their eyes, and before fighting with their arms, they must fight with their heart. What comes next is the miracle. And it begins with a prayer that transcends time. Stay until the end, because we have a revelation that will surprise you. The battlefield was set. On one side, 1 million Ethiopian soldiers with 300 war chariots, a force that would make any king bow in fear. But Asa's knee touched the ground for another reason. He knew that victory did not come from human strength, but from divine intervention. According to 2 Chronicles 14, verse 11, the exact words of his prayer, one of the briefest yet most powerful in the Bible, are recorded. Lord, to you nothing is impossible, whether with many or with few. Help us, Lord our God, for in you we trust, and in your name we come against this multitude. This prayer was not merely a request. It was a declaration of faith, a complete surrender, a cry from the soul of someone who knew that without God, he was defeated before the battle even began. But Asa was not alone, and he knew it. The structure of the prayer reveals three profound truths about the heart of that king. First, the recognition of divine power. He begins with, "Nothing is impossible for you," a clear acknowledgement that God does not operate according to human logic. He can act with many, with few, or even with none, because he is the Lord. Second, the confession of dependence. Help us, Lord our God. Asa did not place his trust in his 580,000 soldiers. He knows that without the Lord, no number, no matter how great, would be enough. His strength comes from above, and that is what he clings to. Third, total surrender. We have come against this multitude in your name. The king surrenders not just a battle, but the glory of victory itself. Asa does not seek to win for his own acclaim. He seeks to win so that God's name may be honored among the nations. These words carry the weight of faith measured not by what is seen, but by what is believed. Asa stood before a multitude, yet he saw beyond it. He saw the God of heavenly armies, invisible to human eyes, but present in the spirits of those who believe. This prayer echoes other powerful prayers in the Bible, like that of Jehoshaphat, who, faced with an overwhelming enemy, declared, "We have no power, but our eyes are on you." 2 Chronicles 20, verse 12. Or like Hannah, who did not need to raise her voice. She simply moved her lips in sincerity, and God heard. Or like David before Goliath, "I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts." Asa's prayer carries the same DNA: simplicity, dependence, and an unshakable faith. According to theologian Chrysostom, a prayer made in faith is a wall stronger than stones. Augustine said, "When man prays with humility, God inclines to listen." And God heard Asa. But before the answer came, there was silence. The kind of silence that precedes the thunder of glory. Asa rose from that sacred ground of prayer, and with him, the invisible force of heaven arose. Imagine the impact on the army, generals, soldiers, officers, all witnessing their king kneel. In modern times, this might seem like weakness, but to Asa, it was leadership. True leadership begins on one's knees, and the people were moved. Fear gave way to faith. Despair yielded to hope. Something had shifted in the air, and it was not mere strategy, it was presence. Today, many face their own zeros, giant enemies, fatal diagnoses, insurmountable debts, silent depressions. You look around and see an army surrounding you, making victory seem impossible. But listen to Asa's prayer, feel its truth, and understand. Nothing is impossible for God. You do not need many. You do not need strength. You do not need visibility, recognition, or resources. You need a heart that depends on Him. A sincere prayer made in faith still moves heaven. And that is exactly what happened on the plains of Mareshah. Before any arrow was launched, the miracle was already on its way, because Asa's God does not change. He hears, He acts, He saves. Stay until the end, because the victory that follows is one of the most extraordinary extraordinary in all of biblical history. What happened there will shake your faith. The sky was still hazy with the dust stirred by the war chariots. 1 million Ethiopian soldiers stood like a tsunami, ready to swallow Judah. But they had no idea they were about to be defeated by something no military strategy could withstand. Sincere prayer, a dependent heart, and the invisible hand of the Almighty God. The continuation of the account is found in 2 Chronicles 14, verses 12 to 15. And the Lord struck down the Ethiopians before Asa and before Judah, and the Ethiopians fled. Just like that, no complex tactical maneuvers, no human glory. It was God who defeated them. The biblical text makes it clear. This was not just a victory. It was a direct intervention. As the Ethiopian war chariots surged forward, something paralyzed them. As enemy soldiers advanced, something confused them. What began as an attack soon became a retreat. The people of Judah, led by Asa, pursued the Ethiopians all the way to Gerar, a region near Philistine territory. There, the remnants of the invading army were completely destroyed. They did not simply win, they dominated. And then came the spoils. The Bible mentions that they took camels, sheep, tents, and abundant riches. The fields of the enemy became the inheritance of the faithful. God not only delivered them from war, He rewarded them with provision. The impact of this victory was immense. Judah went from being a vulnerable target to a feared power. Asa's fame spread like wildfire, not just because of the strength of his army, but because of the uniqueness of his victory. Everyone knew this king trusted in God, and God answered. Archaeological evidence confirms the context of this moment. In Gerar and the surrounding areas of Tel Gerar, researchers have found traces of military occupation and Egyptian records of movements against Nubian forces. Some scholars believe these inscriptions reference southern troops retreating into the desert, driven back by a smaller yet spiritually unified people. Although Asa is not mentioned directly, these historical echoes reinforce the biblical narrative. The victory also carried enormous psychological weight. How many soldiers from Judah left their homes in fear, thinking they would never see their families again? How many mothers prayed for their sons that morning? How many men marched with their hearts pounding like war drums, only to return with peace in their eyes and praise on their lips? This victory was more than military. It was spiritual. It rewrote the identity of Judah. King Asa was now more than just a reformer. He was a living example of how true faith does not just move mountains, it melts armies. The Bible concludes this moment with a simple yet glorious statement. And there was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign. 2 Chronicles 15, verse 19. 35 years of peace, free from invasions, years to build, teach, and strengthen, all because Asa chose to depend on God. How often do we face problems that seem impossible? Many times, we try to fight with human strength, but true victory comes through faith and prayer. Asa shows us that the impossible is the stage where God reveals who He is. It is not about strength or the number of soldiers, but about trusting in God. He seeks those who, even in fear, trust Him to face any battle. True victory is found in the rest and peace that God gives. Asa's story teaches us that faith is more powerful than any army. Dependence on God brings lasting peace, far greater than any war. If you are at a crossroads, trust in God, because those who kneel before Him stand firm before any enemy. Asa's victory brought 35 years of peace, and the same God who helped him is with you now. Will you trust? Because those who trust in God never fight alone. Have you subscribed yet? If not, now is the time. Click subscribe now, leave a like, and comment on how this message touched your heart. Let's share stories that build up, awaken faith, and remind the world Our God still fights for us.